Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this Coaching Journeys series. When we first started working with Jess, the star of this show, she was about a 4 or 5 BB loser at 25NL Russian cash on GG Poker. We've now been working with Jess for just over 2 months, and we've definitely seen some improvements in her thought process, confidence, mental game, and just ability to know what to think about as she works her way through poker spots. All of these things are really important in any coaching journey. But let's face it, so are results. Graphs matter. And I get it, you guys want to see how Jess is doing. That's why today, in this midway checkpoint video, in this series from Stalling to Mauling, we are going to look at Jess's graph before coaching. We've seen it before, but I want to remind her of that graph and remind you guys as well. And we're going to compare it to her graph since the start of February when this journey began. Jess sounds like she knows what she's talking about a lot more now, but have her results improved? Do we have anything to show for all of this hard work? Let's find out. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this checkpoint in your favourite series from Stalling to Mauling. Jess, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. I think poker's been going quite well. Still haven't checked any of my graphs or stuff. So yeah, I think it's been doing.
You think it's been okay, yeah? You think you've been winning,
yeah? I think it's actually, maybe. I do think I've been thinking after sessions, like, how was that session? Without looking at a graph, trying to think how I done, like we've said before. And like, I am kind of feeling like it's going okay. I feel like I'm making the right decisions. Volume hasn't been amazing the past 2 weeks because we've had half term and I've been away doing stuff. But when I have been playing, I think I've been kind of turning up and doing all right.
Well, the graph on screen would beg to differ, I'm afraid, Jess. But the good news is that this is your graph before coaching.
Yes.
So I wanted the audience to think like, she thinks she's doing well, but really her graph's terrible, blah, blah, blah. So I put this on screen as you were saying that things have been going better. Do you remember this one? This is from up until the start of February when we began this journey together. You'd never worked with me before in your life when you had this graph, and this is over 94,000 hands that you'd played in, like, I guess the year before that mostly, and a little bit of 2023 as well. Bad memories.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think this kind of person was very results orientated, and obviously had so many big leaks as well. Like, the stuff that you've kind of showed us I was doing wrong makes so much sense now, but like 100%, this wasting lots of buy-ins, not picking up stuff, like being a vulture. Not
being enough of a vulture is a common problem. Are you ready to see your graph now? The after graph, the graph from the 3rd of February. This graph ends at the 3rd of February, the day we started our coaching. Are you ready to see what this graph became since then?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to show you the inverse of this. I'm going to show you from the start of February until now.
Ta-da!
This is better.
I love it. Definitely.
It's like when you got your tattoo done. It's like you just saw it for the first time and you were like, I love it. I love this graph.
Yes.
So this could be your next tattoo. Is you're now the proud owner of this graph, which is not over a big sample. It's only over 25,000 hands. But I would say that the way you were playing before, it would have been highly unlikely that you would have been able to win like this. You are actually running at a few BB per 100 positive here, like 4 or 5 BB per 100 positive over that sample, which is really, really good. And it does mean that it's highly likely that you're now at least break even, if not winning, pre-rake back. Post-rake back, sky's the limit. You're winning even more. You're building your bankroll nicely. You were able to cash out for the first time, really, that you were able to cash out something from your roll the other day?
Yeah, for the first time in like a good year odd since I moved into this flat, I kind of withdrew. Yeah, when I was last time I was playing 25 and now I withdrew like $1,500, $1,800 or something to put my deposit down for the flat and then build it back up. So yeah, since that deposit, that's the first time I've done. And I kind of, even though I've not been looking at my results, I kind of glimpsed my balance when I was checking for some tournament ticket and was like, I don't really need this sat on there. I had like 2,300 and I'm playing 25 and kind of happy doing that as well. I'm not itching to move up or anything. I was like, I don't really need that on there. So I just took 200 or 300 out.
Which is nice. It's a good little bonus because it gives some kind of transient real world meaning to your bankroll. It's not just this level of a computer game or like the high score that you're trying to increase, but it's actually like actual tokens that can do stuff in real life and can improve your life for the better if you do well. So I'm all for people taking a bit out of their bankroll, treating themselves to something, feeling the real life benefit and like sort of self-pampering a little bit with that money. I think that's a really important way to enhance the feedback loop of winning at poker and what that feels like. And you're no longer a rakeback grinder relying on GG Poker giving you handouts to survive and keep your roll healthy. You're actually able to profit pre-rakeback now, which is really excellent. You've moved from scavenging rakeback grinder to fully fledged, self-sufficient poker player. So that must be a nice feeling.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm enjoying it. Like, my long-term goal for poker has always been to have it as a bit of a little side income. Like, I don't think I've got a decent job. I think it would be very hard for me to meet that level to sustain like my current spending and stuff. Like, I think it would be a lot to do that as a full-time poker player. So my goal has always been to just be kind of part-time player, making a bit of side money through the year and able to withdraw for like holidays and weekends away and stuff like that. That'd be perfect to me.
Yeah, I definitely think you're way too much of a degenerate to be able to like support your lifestyle through playing 25 and L. There are some people that do that. They just live off of like Frosties with water, like not even milk in their Frosties, just water in their Frosties, and then they grind 25 and L for a living. If you're not from the UK,
Thanks.
Frosties are a sugary breakfast cereal with a tiger on the front called Tony. That's what Frosties are. So when we factor in the rakeback that you're getting, you're obviously streaming for Flip, Fantastic Ladies in Poker, and you're affiliated with GG as well, and they're giving you some rakeback in order to support the streaming that you're doing. So when you factor all that in as well, it's actually been quite a profitable couple of months given the stakes that you're playing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So today then, let's get on to some technical work. How is the Carrot Poker School going? I know you've just had a holiday and stuff. You've been seeing family and things. Have you still been working your way through that?
Not really, to be honest. I have picked it up again yesterday and I've restarted episode 5, I think, which is, I'm thinking it was the kind of favorability.
Yep. I think the Carrot Poker School as well, in conjunction with sessions, is a really good thing to do. Like, someone asked us, sent an email into support at Carrot Corner earlier today, just saying, like, I've got the full scholarship, I'm loving it. When should I get coaching? Like, should I wait until I've done all of the grades and then get coaching, or should I get coaching right away? And my opinion on this is that you're doing it really optimally, Jess, where you're taking coaching as you're working your way through and you're actually getting help with implementation as you take in the theory. I think this is definitely the best way to go with a course as dense as the CPS.
Well, yeah, it's literally like a school, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
a teacher and then revising at home.
Exactly, yeah. So that's the best way to do it. Get the theory in a formal, digestible way and then practice it with lots and lots of hand review and in-game thoughts, and your own personal review in your own time as well is, of course, very important. If you are looking to take your game to the next level theoretically, guys, don't forget you can check out the Carrot Poker School at carrotcorner.com. Now, let's get on with the hand reviews, shall we? So we have deuces. Try and get through a bunch of these today. Going to move quite quickly. We face third pot, and we should probably fold here. And we do, yeah. So not many hands or folds that are pairs against range betting, but there's 2 things here. 3 overcards, 2 tone, no diamond, and they're under the gun. So there's like 4 things that I think make this one a fold, even though most pairs to third pot are continues in 6 minutes cash in most spots.
Yeah, I thought it's exactly it.
The easiest way to play this hand against the 3-bet at this rake structure is just to pitch it, like in these positions. This is a hand that looks a lot better than it is. The problem with a hand like this is that it's highly dominated, Jess, right? Like when you call here, like you hit a queen or you hit a jack, you're not just dominated by like the ace, queen, ace, jack, king, queen, king, jack hands. You're also dominated by overpair. It's the kind of hand where your straight possibility and trips possibility is also more dominated than usual. Like say you flop a straight here and the board is like ace, king, 10. Problem is, if your opponent has aces, they're actually really live there, or kings, they're really live there. Whereas when you have like 6-5 suited, this is a really profitable call, because when you flip a straight, the opponent's like literally dead. Like they have none of the cards that give them a hope in hell of doing anything. In high rate games, be really careful with stuff like queen jack out of position to a 3-bet. I know you've called here because this is a VPIP filter, but I actually don't think that we should.
Okay,
so yeah, this is a unfavorable world for our range. We need to lead with quite a lot of trepidation here. We need to be pretty careful about what we start bluffing and what we don't. I would say that it's unusual for someone to check this flop. How would you say Pool's range kind of leans after they check this flop? Because it's a non-standard check back.
Yeah, I would say so. I think it kind of leans towards kind of the bigger pairs like jacks, queens, kings, who just don't want to range bet on the ace. And basically about it. Maybe even some flush draws as well. But how many of them do they have? Maybe some king, queen suited or something. Yeah, maybe a flush draw checks that back. Or like something that's absolutely nutted, something like aces or 4s. So
probably 4s isn't a thing from pre here very often, but aces is certainly a hand that would play this way. I think you could get like ace jack or something like a mediocre ace playing this way, ace 5. That you could also see like kings, queens would be the bulk of the range. It's not a spot where I love your fold equity against humans, to be honest. Like, usually when people check back on the flop, they're underprotected, and turn probes tend to work really well, like much better against humans than they do against solvers, actually. However, I think this is one of these spots where the turn probe is not going to work well. Fold equity may even be less than it is in equilibrium, and we either need to commit to like bet and then like atom bomb the river, just like absolutely nuke the river, or just check now. That's basically the only options we have here, because I think this will be an underfolded spot that's overprotected. It's just too easy for people to see bet here with their air and check back their kings, etc. So I guess what I'm saying is your immediate fold equity against humans with one bet here is not very good. But I like it post flop, that seems fine. But yeah, you can fold pre there. You can actually tighten up at these high rake structure games. Don't feel like you need to play hands like Queen Jack in a 3-bet pot under the gun against hijack. You do in late position, but not there. Win a flip one time. Chop, chop. All right, 3-bet ace queen. 7-6-3, I would play quite a lot of check on this board. This is not a board I'd be anywhere near betting range. If you do bet, you can bet big, because while you don't have a massive range advantage here, you do have an overpair monopoly that's pretty prevalent, so you can definitely use big bets when you do bet. You could bet ace queen, you could check ace queen, doesn't really matter. And yeah, gross, like I think against third pot here, we're already really indifferent. Peeling is probably not out with the realms of possibility. I think you can have some raises here as well. I don't know if you consider that, a lot of people don't, but if you think about it, their range is going to be quite mergy. They're going to have some sets and stuff, but they're also just going to have like jacks, tens, they're going to have bluffs. So you're definitely allowed to raise like some of your overcards here as a bluff. You're not going to have a straight draw here. You're not going to have an 8 very often to bluff with in these situations. So you're definitely allowed to raise some of your big cards that are kind of indifferent between calling, raising, and folding. So this is something no one ever does, but I just want to point out that you could have checked back an overpair in the flop, and you could now be raising the turn with it. So you are allowed to build some raises here against the small bet specifically.
Okay.
Go for call, which I think is okay. Villain checks. Now, this is a really interesting node. So what do we think is going on here?
I feel like the turn was just kind of a turn probe stab. This was last night, so I actually remember my thought process on this. I thought that the turn bet, being a small one, was maybe just like a probing stabby bet.
What does that mean, a probing stabby bet? Like, what are you saying about their range when you say it's a probing stabby bet? Because probe is just the name of the node. Like, that is a turn probe. Yes, that's the label of the bet, but what do you mean to say about their range when you say just a stabby probey bet?
A lot of weaker hands merged, I suppose. Like, they might, yeah, like you said, they might have some absolute monsters they've checked. They could also just have like King Jack, something like that, like ace jacks that are just taking a little stab on the turn. And then when they checked back here, I thought I kind of did think about whether this was a kind of must bluff. I felt like there was more equity in bluffing than there was checking back, because they might have some kind of like, I don't know, they might have ace king, for example, that beats us, basically the only hand we beat. So I thought I didn't have much showdown equity when it gets checked back. But I thought I could maybe make them fold because I've been quite kind of passive, and this is now quite a dangerous board for like random ace kings to just call you down with ace high.
Well, the problem I have here is that you've posited one hand that you're actually able to fold out that beats you here only, and that hand would have 4-bet pre a lot or just not bet the turn very frequently. So this hand is barely there. You've kind of invented this hand that isn't there very often, and you've used it to form your entire river thought process, which is a big problem. So let's try and zoom out here. Obviously, I'm being harsh with you. Now that you're winning, I'm like bringing out the whip here, and I'm like being way harsher with like your hand reading. I'm going to like expect a higher standard. You have to earn that graph. So let's hand read in a bit more of a zoomed out way, where we say, okay, ace king is a tiny part of range. If they have a pair, if they have something like 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, or 10s, none of these are folding because they're all straights or sets. And they're probably not even here that often in the first place. If they have jacks, yes, I agree. Jacks is another hand that like might fold here that you can beat, but it might just not fold. Because here's the thing. You don't really have much of a value range on this river. Like your aces, kings, and queens don't really seem to be very obvious value bets here to me on this texture. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Your ace, king, ace, queen are not value bets. You basically have very few value hands at all here. Maybe you've hit like 8s on the river or 10s on the river, and you can definitely value bet both of those. Maybe you have like 10-9 or something sometimes, but you don't have that much of a value range. If you're going to bluff here, you have to understand that you need to be saying that it's not just ace king that can fold. You don't want to be too vague about that, but you need to be saying that villain's range is almost entirely made up of hands that are folding to your bet. Like you need the fold equity to be very, very large. And that's because check is very profitable. On the turn, you listed king jack, king queen, ace jack, queen jack as ostensible bluffs for villain. Like villain could have these hands, and we are showing down and we are winning against all of these hands. So before we get to like, we have to bluff them off exactly ace king, or we have to bluff them off exactly jacks, how about just acknowledging the fact that we win here really often when villain is just missing their bluffs?
Yeah.
They're not folding a set, they're not folding a straight. We win really often. They have hardly any hands. This little tiny island of hands they have, that A beats us and B folds to this bet, is really small, and I don't even know that they fold jacks to this bet. They might just get suspicious and be like, nah, I don't believe you. So at the end of the day, I think you should check here, or maybe you should like overbet 2x pot and hope that you get them off like their whole range or something like that. Just claim to have a 10 and just go from there. You could maybe do that, but I like a really big bet here, or I like a check. That's it. And I'd be wary that they may check their sets on the river here because they're freaking out. That doesn't mean they're going to fold their sets. Just because they're freaking out enough to check doesn't mean they've got a game plan to actually check fold. They're probably still going to call a lot of the time. So weigh up your showdown value. Don't narrowly target hands. You're targeting ace king there. You're zooming in too much. There's a reason that anyone who has ever said targeting is bad at poker, guys, there's a reason for this, and it's that it is a trash thought process. Zoom out, look at the full picture. Don't bluff unless you think villain is almost always folding to your bet, because otherwise you've got way too much check EV here. You've got to like acknowledge your showdown value. If you're going to say they have a mergy, trash-filled range on the turn with loads of air combos, still you can't like forget about them on the river. Checking wins against them. So some improvements we can build in there. I don't like this sizing. I feel like this sizing is just, unless villain has exactly ace king, this is a polarization mistake and a pointless bet, because like I really don't think jacks is folding very often to this bet. I don't think a set is ever folding. What better hand folds? There's just none, basically none. Yeah. Apart from maybe like ace 9 or something occasionally, but there's not enough. So when villain folds there, they probably just had like king jack, something like that. Weigh up your showdown value before you bluff. I agree that if you'd got there with like queen jack, not sure how you would do that, but if you had for some reason got there with nothing, yes, it's a mandatory bluff. Maybe in game theory, you are at the bottom of your range and you can consider bluffing in game theory, and they should then fold jacks a lot and blah, blah, blah. I just don't think in reality it's a good bet. I just don't think it achieves enough unless you go really big. All right. But at least you did kind of understand that you're at the bottom of your range, but then the reasoning about the ace king and stuff was way too tunnel vision-y, right? That wasn't really so good. But overall, I think we just need to take the broad strokes here and zoom out a bit more. Okay, so when you're against a cold caller, you do want to do a load of checking. This is a board, however, that's massively good for you. When you get cold called, make some exceptions in spots like this, where usually you will check range because the cold caller's range is compact and your range has more trash in it. But on this board, your range is just like all your trash is like connecting in some way. Your broadways are connecting. Their pairs are getting decimated. They're basically the pair person and you're the person with all of the big cards and big pairs. So you actually like this board. I would stick to like frequent bets here. Don't hate the check at all. In isolation, it's fine, but I do a lot of betting there. Who knows what these players are doing at 25 NL, Russian cash and GG. They could be doing anything. Easy call. There's definitely a lot of sporadic betting in a game like this, right? Like people are betting without definition. So easy call. I'd call again and just be like, yeah, screw you. You're doing a lot of random shit. I don't care. Nice. And yeah, when you leave their range really wide, you will see stupid stuff at showdown, like, oh, a hand that beats you that's actually very reasonable. Moving on. Calling ace 3. Check, check. Turn probe strategy. Sizing. What will it be if we build the betting range? Let me play a trick on you. Ha. You can't see your cards. Too bad. Now you have to tell me a strategy. You cannot reference your hand.
Oh, Jesus. I think I've ever done this.
Too bad. Suffer.
What do you mean build the strategy? Like 4 hands that we could have in our range? Because we have...
No, let's just talk about what size we would want to lead for here if we're leading. Let's begin with that, and then we'll talk about how we would construct that betting range, which hands would go in it, which ones wouldn't.
Okay, so like 1/3 to half?
Okay.
Like small?
So the way I would think about this spot is that if I was only going to use one sizing, it would be huge.
Oh.
Because what has villain given up when they check back on the flop here? They've not given up the range advantage. Their equity is still going to be quite high compared to ours, but what have they forfeited?
The aggression and nut advantage?
The nut advantage. Aggression, you're beginning to verge on initiative here. I will ban you from the channel if you use the word initiative, and I will find a new student to replace you. They've given up the nut advantage, which means that when we have king, queen, ace, queen, sevens, fours, deuces, queen, 7, 7, 4 suited, how high equity are those hands?
Quite.
How big a pot do they crave?
Yeah, like a bigger one than 1/3.
Yeah, so maybe there is some one thirding here. Like maybe you can build one third around exactly ace 7 and exactly pocket 10s and exactly queen 10. But don't bother. There's no reason to. Your primary sizing, the one you cannot do without here, is the overbet. Build around the overbet when you're turn probing. Say it back to me.
Build around the overbet when you're turn probing.
Yeah, I will. Thanks for the advice, Jess. I will do that. So let's not build around one third. Now, if we're building around the overbet, I just gave you all the value combos we'd include there. Something like queen, jack flush draw plus, king, queen plus. So I've given you the value combos. What do you think you would need to have to start bluffing here? What kind of criteria would you need to adhere to?
Kind of like 5-6, ace-3, like 3-6, stuff that has like a bit of equity when called.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's a really still hostile environment for your range in terms of equity versus equity, range versus range. Carrot Poker School teaches us, like the Bible teaches people things back in the day, that we cannot just lead indiscriminately. We can't just lead in game theory willy-nilly here, because villain has a really easy time defending if and only if they've protected that flop range. And sometimes people don't. Sometimes people underprotect their flop range and you can get away with murder here, but let's stick to the theory for now. The other hand you could lead here is like a flush draw, like jack 10, something like that. You could also like overbet some bottom pair, like some ace deuce, king deuce, stuff like this with like the pair draw. That would be fine. So if we turn your cards back on for a second here, you definitely have a hand that's capable of probing. Build around the overbet in these spots. There are some exceptions, like if the top card pairs or a flush comes or something happens that evens out the polarization of the two ranges again, if you see what I mean, that kind of like makes villain's range less capped, uncaps their range or re-uncaps their range, then okay, we can tread with a bit more caution and go a bit smaller, but yeah, build around the overbet, especially on these really bricky turn cards where you just keep the big nut advantage. You can also check raise some of your big hands here and check call, like some of your big draws can also check raise here. This one I think I prefer leading, because if you face a bet with exactly ace-3 of spades, it gets a little bit tricky. Okay, maybe you can still check raise, like I think you can, but I think I just prefer overbet here. I think in practice overbet just does very, very well in this spot. With this hand, I think people overfold to it. For instance, I don't think they check enough queen X on the flop. I think they check too many under pair, ace high, low pair, stuff like that. You're just going to do really well with the overbet here, so don't be afraid to overbet this hand.
Okay.
By the river, though, you just have ace high. You shouldn't really win here, but you have the wrong blockers to bluff. You do not want to block an ace here. The ace is their folding range on the river. That's the thing, they check back twice and then fold. You don't want to bluff with an ace or a king in your hand here. On the river, your bluff should come from things like 8 high, 9 high, 10 high, stuff that unblocks the folding range. Would like to see a give up now. So it's kind of counterintuitive that on the turn, you can bluff because you still have all this equity and EV and implied odds to come on certain runouts, but on the river, this is now just a give up. Basically, you have to be selective on this river, and I don't think ace-3 is really the ticket here.
Okay.
Any questions on this?
No, not at all. I think that's cool. Like the turn overbet, that's something definitely. I don't think I'd do that. I don't think that's very much in my locker at all.
Well, put it in your locker. It's not difficult to put it in your locker. You just have to remember to do it. And once you do it a couple of times and you get folds, you're going to come to me like next week and be like, Pete, I fucking love overbetting the turn. I'm getting folds. And I'm going to be like, Jess, you're doing it with pocket sevens, man. You're doing it with the middle of your range. Like, don't do that. I'm going to have to wind you back in again, right? So we'll go through this process of doing it too much and doing it just the right amount. This is how students are. It's fine. But maybe now I've given you that pep talk, you won't do it with random hands. I see a lot of that in games like this where people have heard about overbetting and they suddenly do it with like top pair no kicker. And it's like, no, that's wrong. That's a polarization mistake. Just make sure you're doing it with the right part of your range. I think you know how to do that. But implementing it in game is another thing. Okay, call pocket sevens. Horrible spot. I guess you can just fold this one. Not often you fold a pair to one range bet. We are working on making sure your red line is better. So only fold pocket pair there if there are 3 broadways, not 2. If that's like king, 10, deuce, you don't fold sevens, yeah? But ace, queen, jack, you can. Bump it up with ace, king here, go for small z-bet. I think this texture is like kind of bad for you actually. Like it's, well, not bad, but it's not as good a texture in late position 3-bit pots as people think, because the queen is a very prevalent card in the offsuit variant in buttons open and call a 3-bet range, right? They have ace, queen off, they have king, queen off, they have all this kind of stuff. They also have 9s and 6s. You have more ace, king, ace, 5, ace, jack. These are bad hands. This is not as good a board for you as you would think. Okay, I'm being biased here. I'm very much being a politician that's campaigning for this being a bad board for you. You do have good hands here too, like ace, queen, kings, aces, etc. But yeah, this is a spot where I probably wouldn't range bet. I would do quite a bit of checking.
So if the queen is a spade, that's better for us.
But it's better for our hand.
All right, yeah, it's better for our hand anyway, but we've also removed their kind of suited queens that might have called.
Objection. A lot of their queens are offsuit when they're in late position, so it's not as good a blocker as it is when they're in early position where they only have suited queens. So in late position, they have offsuit queens as well, so yeah, you remove some of them, but imagine they're under the gun. Now it's really cool that you have spades and not diamonds, because then you remove their suited stuff. Basically, the ace and king of diamonds are the cards that you don't want if you're against an early position caller of your 3-bet, because they're just going to have the suited queens, and of course you don't block those with diamonds because the queen of diamonds is on the board. So blocker wise, it's kind of the same here. You don't have a backdoor with this hand, which kind of sucks, but you can still bet. This bet's not bad or anything, like it's fine. It's just like overall I wouldn't be range betting, that's all. Okay, interesting turn spot. The suits here, the ones you want to avoid here are hearts and clubs for the most part. So when you're barreling with a hand, the hand not to barrel here is probably ace of hearts, king of clubs, or king of hearts, ace of clubs, because these are going to block the backdoor hands. When you have spades, you can definitely bet in GTO. Like, there's no reason you can't. Spades is actually better than those suits that block the backdoors. You follow me here?
Right, okay. Yeah, I get you.
So you can look out for that little pattern. Having a diamond is, of course, better. The hands I'd be more prone to bet with here would be like ace of diamonds, king of spades, or something like that. It's a really good barrel. But overall here, I think you can always just take the cash injection exploit in this spot, which is to barrel off and be like, screw you. Cash injection is, of course, all about 10 quick exploitative recipes that can really boost your win rate without you having to get that good at poker. That's right, you don't actually have to get very good at cards to profit massively from our exploitative, of course, cash injection. Check out carrotcorner.com, it's only $99.99 UK pounds, and it will give you a quick boost to your win rate. So one of the things we talk about, Jess, in cash injection is this idea that tripling in 3-bet pots can be quite effective in the right spots. There are some caveats, there are some qualifiers, but without going into too much detail about what those are, don't want to give away the full trove of cash injection secrets here, this is not a bad spot. It's not the best in the world, but it's not a bad spot to close your eyes and triple off against humans and be like, I dare you to call off in enough. This is an okay spot.
Okay. Obviously, because I haven't done cash injection.
Well, since you haven't done cash injection, your red line is not very healthy. Cash injection, it saves your red line, it gets you laid, it allows you to find a romantic partner if you're currently struggling. It does a lot of things for you, really.
Yeah, so here I'm just kind of like, not really sure, like out of position. They've definitely got some diamonds that might call with like backdoor flushes, just kind of in the give up phase here.
Yeah, so I can just grab you and take you away from this tunnel vision targeting habit of yours every time you do it. You're mentioning diamonds? Why mention diamonds? Like, okay, so what? So what, someone can have a flush draw so we can never bluff? We know that's not how theory works, right? We don't just stop bluffing because they might have a flush draw. So let me drag you away from that. The way you think about this spot is that it's not an amazing world for you, so you need to satisfy, again, certain criteria in order to elect your hand as a bluff. This is CPS stuff. Grade 1, Lecture 3. We talk about this a lot. We also talk about this in Grade 2, Lecture 5, which is about the out position game. Ace King here has blockers to Queen X. It unblocks the backdoors that would have called flop to fold, like Ace Jack, things like that, right? That would only call if they're backdoor usually. And it also has overcards to like Queen Jack or Queen 10. You have like 2 really good pair overcards of 6 really good pair outs here. This is absolutely a hand that can barrel, and you're inventing reasons to give up here that don't exist. Yes, you need to have some selectivity. No, you can't barrel ace 5 of clubs here. You can't do that. That's not allowed. That's a blunder because it's a negative blocker hand with ace of clubs, and it doesn't have 2 overcards to the queen or even to like pocket 10s or a 9. But ace king has 2 overcards, has the blockers. It's a good enough hand to barrel in this world. Stop grabbing random factors and using them to define the entire framework. What we need to do here is install a bluff sort of survival guide for bluffing. What's the world? If it's good for me, I don't even need to care. I can just do all kinds of stuff. You c-bet the flop and the turn is a king. You can do whatever the hell you want in most situations in 3-bet pots. Whenever the turn is a king, just bet. Like, you can't really go wrong. Like, it's that simple. But when you're in an unfavorable world, like this one that's kind of borderline unfavorable, you've got to be more careful, but not to the point that you shut down everything, and not to the point where you shut down everything because you're focusing on just one part of their range. Apply the favorability test, then apply the bluff sort of prosperity test where you ask, like, well, how prosperous is this bluff? Does it have enough positive features? This one has a lot of positive features, Jess. It's not that bad a bluff.
Okay.
So you can definitely use it here. Don't like hate the check fold. I'm not going to say like that's a mistake or anything, but you're not being aggressive enough and it shows in your red line. You're like a lion that's hunting antelope but it thinks the antelopes are lions, so it stops hunting them. Because, like, actually the pool overfolds in 3-bet pots in most cases on the turn. We know this from mass data. So you should actually be attacking them ferociously. Like, if you're on the fence about whether to barrel in a 3-bet pot at these stakes, you just barrel. If you're on the fence, but hopefully you have a good thought process to work that out. So definitely a bit too much tunnel vision going on. Let's wrap this up there. What would you say have been the main... Let's go back to the graphs for a second here, the before and after graphs. What would you say has been the main thing that's gotten you from here to here in the past 2 and a bit months? Any advice for people that were where you were when you started this journey? What would you say to them?
I think just kind of thinking about when people have filtered their range with some of their actions, kind of multi-way pots where they've shown a bit of strength that kind of means a bit more than if it was heads up. Also, sticking around a bit more versus flop c-bets. I think I was giving up way too easily, especially when we've got like, you know, on like a 2-7 queen board, when we've got like jack king or something daft like that, like when we've got plenty of overs. Yeah, just kind of check folding in lots of spots there, picking better spots to bluff as well, without a doubt. And that kind of ties into how they've filtered their range when they're really strong and you're just not going to get a bluff through, kind of not like bringing that aggression down a bit to being more selective.
Yep.
And it's quite good that last hand on the turn. That's obviously where kind of I need to be a bit more like, that is about selectivity, and it's just obviously not something I'm thinking about. It's out of position as well. I think I've still got to learn a bit about playing out of position, especially things like check raises and stuff, like with that ace-3. I don't think I check raise very much there. I have learned a ton, and I can tell, like, also things like the polarization, making polarization errors. I think I used to do that all the time, like on rivers where we can check back ace king and still be beating lots of stuff, and I'd like put a bet in and then maybe they'd check raise or something, and like, I don't know. I think polarization errors were like a massive thing for me, so kind of learning about that has really helped.
Yeah, the way I would see your game is that you used to make decisions just based on random thoughts. Like, it sounds like someone that just watched like a ton of streamers and like heard random thoughts, and many of them weren't even good, and then you were just like grabbing them and using them like one at a time, like in this like just totally like lucky dip sort of hand in the bag, pull something out kind of way. But now, like, we're starting to implement protocol, and we're starting to say, well, what should we actually be thinking about here? Like, let's show some restraint here before we just dive into like one part of their range and get obsessive about it, or one thought. Can we just sit back and say, well, what is the right way to think? Like, what is the outline of the thought process before we color it in? If we're like grabbing the wrong outline, it doesn't matter how well you color that in. If I say, draw a picture of a snowman, a white snowman with buttons and a carrot as a nose, as they generally have, and it's, you know, on brand. If I tell you to do that and you actually draw an outline of a frog, well, it doesn't matter how well you color the frog in. You're not going to like pass that test, right? You're not going to draw the snowman at all. So if you grab the wrong shape of thought process, you can't save it. It's too late. Sit back and judge, like, what am I meant to do here? What's my job here as a poker thinker? What's the template? And then I'll like fill it in once I've got that, because you're good at filling it in. Like most students, you're good at filling it in. It's just you grab the wrong thought process sometimes. So it's a matter of just being careful.
I feel like paying attention to equity in hands as well is something that you know, like when we're betting 75% or whatever on the river, and how much equity do we need when gold, like that kind of stuff. And also using that when I'm kind of analyzing spots in like GTO Wizard or whatever after, I've turned on the little option now that shows me the equity too, and paying attention to when there's not much difference in equities between different actions. So when like checking and betting is like, there's not much difference at all. It's kind of just realizing that, you know, that's quite
It's liberating.
Yeah, it's realizing that spot, like, you can't really make many mistakes there.
Yep.
So it was all right. If I didn't do what the solver says I could have done, like, I think that's been really helpful as well.
Yeah, like, you're not being a slave to GTO anymore. It's not like, oh, the solver's doing that, so I have to copy it, or I'm no good, I'm worthless if I don't do what the solver's doing exactly. Really, it's about understanding, of course, the one and only concept that's ever going to matter for you, win rate, which is, of course,
True EV.
True EV. You heard it from Jess first. All right, guys, it's goodbye from me and Jess. It's goodbye from Ninja the cat, who's currently lying on the keyboard. As always, had his tail amputated the other day. It's a long story, but he's doing a lot better now, I'm pleased to announce. And if you like the content, give Ninja some continued well wishes in the comments. Do like the video, and of course, check out carrotcorner.com for all of our paid content. Jess will be back with you in a week or two for more From Stalling to Mauling. We are definitely on the road to mauling now. We are no longer stalling. And yeah, mission accomplished. Now onwards and upwards. Let's get you crushing. All right, guys. See you next time.
See ya. Thanks.